Welcome to the first NFL mock draft of the offseason. You'll get about 5 from myself and others at BTO Media, but the college football season is over. Michigan were crowned national champions earlier in the week. The NFL regular season is over. We're on to the postseason now. So for me, it's draft season. And the reason that I enjoy doing something this early, yes, the draft is going to be wildly inaccurate come April. Yes, by the time the combine gets here, you're going to say, how was this guy in your top 20 in a mock draft? How was he picked in the top 5? But I like to put this out now because there are some narratives, there are some storylines that I am pushing to start the offseason here, to start draft season. I push these narratives. I like to put it on tape. We can revisit it when the draft comes around. I enjoy doing this. I know that, not all of this is going to be accurate. Not all of this is going to be close, but let's just have some fun with it and see what we can get right throughout this draft season, and maybe just start to get the ball rolling a little bit here on some conversations that maybe aren't being had outside of us at BTO. Make sure also, before you get into this and we all dive in, you subscribe to Hardline Sports Talk, The Playbook, and BTO Media as a whole. We have the main thing. We have a couple other projects coming soon, so stay tuned. But I appreciate you sticking around with us for these first few months, and especially coming here to watch this video. Let's not waste any more time, though. I'll tell you the quick structure of how we're going to break this down. Being that it's an early mock draft, you probably only know 8 to 12 players, and that's okay. That's perfectly acceptable. In this first round, there's 32 guys, of course, and you're not going to know all of them. That's fine. So after the first 10 picks, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on the selections and my reasoning, but what you will see is on the left side, as you see now, the left side of your screen is the actual mock, and on the right side, I will be popping up some notes. I keep this first 5 a little secretive. I try to do my best to limit it and have an element of surprise in there for yourselves watching, because the first 5 is the most exciting selections of the draft. And then once we get out of this, it'll be less secretive. You'll see the whole screen right away. We won't have these blockers in. But let's not waste any more time. First, right away, we go with the Chicago Bears. It's Caleb Williams. Now, Caleb Williams is just undoubtedly the right move for Chicago in my mind. I don't think I will change my thinking in that. It might be altered in mock drafts, because if we hear stuff, they love Drake May, Caleb Williams won't play for Chicago, then we'd have to go with a different route in the mocks. But for me, Caleb Williams is the player I would take in the Bears spot. I would not trade back. I really like Caleb Williams. Is he generational? I don't totally think so. I don't think he's a top 7 or 8 prospect of all time to be the number 1 slot at quarterback. But I like Caleb Williams for the Bears. We'll get more into the reasoning when we get into the notes portion of this section. Drake May would be my second pick. Very similar in talent potential to Caleb. I think that you're pretty pleased walking out with either of these guys. And we go quarterback for the first 3 picks, as LSU quarterback Jaden Daniels would end up with the Patriots in this mock draft. And I think that Patriots fans would be fairly excited with this pick. We'll go into why in just a moment. And rounding out the top 5, Marvin Harrison Jr., the best player in the draft. And the Falcons trade in to the Chargers spot here. They move up from 8 to 5 for J.J. McCarthy. The trade details there are the Chargers send pick 5 and they receive pick 8, pick 43, and an Atlanta 2025 second round. So they just move up a couple spots to secure that quarterback. I think the value could garner even more if the quarterbacks fly off like this. But let's go through the notes here and a little bit of explanation. So Justin Fields, the way I look at it is you have to take all of his pro tape and college tape that you evaluated him on a few years ago, and now you have this pro tape, and you put it in, and you have to grade him. Is he better than all of the quarterbacks in this class? If he's not better than all of the quarterbacks, if there's one guy that's better than him, in your estimation, you have to draft him. So for me, there are 3 players at quarterback that I would draft over Justin Fields. It is these 3 picks: Caleb, Drake May, and Jaden Daniels. They all have higher grades than he had for me out of college. They're my top 3 quarterbacks in this draft, as they are for many people, and there's not a huge variety between the 3. Now we go to that number 2 pick with Drake May. He grades out the same for me as Caleb Williams, both 93.7, a really terrific grade. The reason I go Caleb is I think he just has more of a skill set, that I feel his floor is not bust, and it won't be bust. It might be he plays for 3 teams, 3 or 4 playoff appearances, 2 or 3 Pro Bowls, and you're underwhelmed, but that's not bad either. It's the floor is an Alex Smith career, and that's something that a lot of teams would take, an Alex Smith player, especially when he was in the Jim Harbaugh years and the Andy Reid years. But Caleb, his running ability is outstanding. His passing ability, obviously, we all know about it, but I just think overall he's the ultimate package for an offensive coordinator to say, hey, we can do so many different things. So then we could run the RPO offense. We could run any sort of West Coast scheme with him. You could run a complete spread offense, which I think is what he's best suited for. He can manage the game. The one concern that has popped up recently is his desire to win, but I can't add that into my grading system because I don't know Caleb Williams, and I can't publicly or he hasn't said anything public that I can use to say, oh, he doesn't like winning. So that's something that I can't factor in here. But talent-wise, what he's put on tape, I would draft him first. And then Drake May, if you just think he fits your scheme better, then you're right by taking him as well, I think. Let's go to the third pick, Jaden Daniels. New England can rebuild at a reasonable rate with Jaden Daniels. You don't have to get 3 or 4 explosive playmakers right away. You can bring in a guy like Greg Roman. You can run a nice RPO style offense with him, carry most of the load, similar to what we saw Anthony Richardson doing earlier this year. Now, the one concern with Jaden Daniels is how much size can he put on before the season, because I do get concerned with his ability to be injured in the NFL, blindside hit, taking a bad sack to the midsection. I think that Jaden Daniels could be in a little bit of trouble there with his size, but it's nothing that won't be fixed over 2 or 3 years. I like Daniels to New England, though, and it totally changes up their philosophy and the way you look at them, because even with Brady, it was very exciting. I loved watching Brady, but now you move into the era that the NFL's in right now, of Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, even guys like Justin Herbert, Trevor Lawrence, that can run. I mean, these guys can all run at a really high level. They're dual threats, but the most important part about Jaden Daniels is I think he has the ability to throw from the pocket first and then become a runner second. But I like Daniels in New England because it welcomes them into, whether Belichick's the coach or not, it welcomes them into the new era of the NFL, which is so exciting at the quarterback position with guys such as Lamar Jackson, like I named before, and Mahomes, Allen. Jaden Daniels is right in there with those guys, as are Drake May and Caleb Williams. I mean, don't sleep on the fact that those two guys are incredible dual threats as well. For the Patriots, I think it's just, you're happy with any of these 3 quarterbacks. You're going to get one of them being the third pick, and Daniels is the guy that I expect to fall there. And then 4, I don't even have to go too far into this. I mean, Kyler Murray's your quarterback because of the contract he has. The team is already committed to him. You can't dump him. And let's face it, he's good enough to be in a situation to take Marvin Harrison and build a postseason team. Marvin Harrison's by far the best player in the draft. He's the second best wide receiver ever to come out of college. In my opinion, Calvin Johnson would be the first home run pick. If they can get him at 4, someone might trade into the top 3 to get a weapon like Harrison, because they don't come around often at all in the draft. As I just said, second best wide receiver of all time. They don't come around often. So here is the shakeup in the top 5 and the first real shakeup of the draft. The Atlanta Falcons need a quarterback. They have one of the best offensive lines in football. Pro Football Focus ranked them 3rd in the NFL. I believe 3rd, certainly top 5. They have Drake London, Kyle Pitts, Bijan Robinson, and the ability to add more at the wide receiver position this offseason. While maybe you think those weapons are Bs, B pluses, I think 2 of them are As, London and Bijan, and I think Pitts absolutely could be. But J.J. McCarthy is a good pick for Atlanta because they can develop him. It depends who your coach is, but this is the guy that is going to go to the combine and he's going to throw it out of the building. He's going to run a 40 that everyone is really surprised by. And a team is going to say, hey, 29-1 in college, totally turned around the Michigan program, turned them back into national champions, beat Ohio State a few years in a row. Why not reach up here and try and develop this kid into a superstar. Because while I don't love JJ McCarthy, I totally see the potential for a great creative offensive mind who's confident in their ability to develop a quarterback to take McCarthy and turn him into a stud. I can see it. I don't think Michigan used him properly. To be quite honest, I think he could benefit in a more spread out offense, more Pac-12 style offense. But Atlanta can provide that for him, and they can provide him with a really good ground game right off the rip. I like J.J. McCarthy's potential to develop in Atlanta. A lot of people are saying right now he's not even a first-round pick. I don't understand how that's possible. I'd be shocked if he fell out of the top 12. I have him going here at 5. And the reason it's McCarthy instead of Penix or Bo Nix. Bo Nix, I just don't think is close to these guys. But Penix, it's the injury and the age. That's the issues here for an NFL general manager to say, how do I take a guy who had 4 years of season-ending injuries in college? That makes it difficult to take him, especially with a top 5, 10 pick. All right, let's move to the second half of the top 10 here. We start with the Giants. Rome Odunze from Washington. He has grown over the last few weeks now with the postseason, with the national championship. This guy is a bona fide stud. He is the best wide receiver prospect in the last 2 or 3 drafts. Since Jamar Chase, how far back do we go for that? But if Marvin Harrison didn't exist, then Odunze would be getting all the love, all the praise in this class. Then you go to the next best weapon available, Brock Bowers, who tight end, Georgia, stud, but Tennessee is going into this complete remodeling phase of their franchise. Mike Vrabel's gone. Derrick Henry's been the face of your franchise for a decade. He's gone. Now you need to pivot, and you need to get yourself the offensive centerpiece that's going to attract a quarterback, that's going to put up points, that's going to be a put the ball in my hands and watch what I do kind of guy. And I love Brock Bowers for it. I think you can scheme him as a wide receiver in the slot. You can scheme him on the outside. You can line him up tight at tight end. He's willing to block. He's the second best tight end prospect I've seen since 2015, and I think that he's just a home run pick for whoever gets him, unless he's used completely incorrectly, which we've seen before. I mean, that would not be an unbelievable thing if it happened. All right, number 8, the Chargers get Malik Nabers. Now, Nabers is a really good player, very good playmaker. He'll add a contrast to the Chargers wide receiving core. He'll bring a lot of speed. He'll bring some really great route running. He'd be a perfect complement to what they have now. Quentin Johnston stinks. With all that being said, I think that they should almost trade back again if this was to be the scenario, because you got to start over on the defense. And Herbert's going to be able to put up points. You can find quality wide receivers for him, whether it's in the mid-tier of free agency, in the second round, in the third round. This is a deep wide receiver class. And you'll see that when we go through deeper mocks and top 50 players. This is a very deep wide receiver class. So the Chargers could get somebody later. I'd be disappointed if they ended up with a receiver. But while playing mock draft, there's going to be situations that teams don't necessarily want to be in, but they have to go with the best player available, and that's Malik Nabers for me. Gets a little funky here. Another trade. Raiders trade into 9 with Chicago. They send pick 13, pick 44, and a 2025 second rounder for pick 9. And they take the first offensive lineman. So here's the theme of this draft for me. Early theme that I'm going to start talking about now is the depreciation of offensive linemen at this point in the draft. It's happened over the last few years to centers completely. Centers have become a second round and on position. And it's going to start happening elsewhere because the top flight playmakers have become so attractive in these drafts that you just have to take them. Offensive line feels a little more replaceable than in the past. While I don't agree with that, it feels that way to coaches and executives because the teams with the best lines aren't taking them in the first round. Very rare you see Dallas or Philly or Green Bay take linemen in the first round. Then you do have franchises like Tampa Bay, who has a great line and took Tristan Wirfs, but then there's the Giants, there's the Jets who take linemen in the first round or the second round year after year after year. It's clearly, like every other position, developmental. You have to develop these positions properly. You have to develop linemen properly. And if you do it, you don't take them high. And if you don't, then you do take them high and you usually fail and end up taking them high over and over and over again at the start of every rebuilding stage that you're in. So J.C. Latham goes first, Alabama right tackle. Colton Miller is the left tackle, and he's very good. He's the franchise left tackle for the Raiders. You move Latham over to the right side. You got bookends. I like Latham a lot. I think he's a project, but the teams will fall in love with his traits. Let's just round out this top 10 with the Jets at 10. I do think they're going to get one of the top 3 tackles in this draft. A lot of fans are down on their ability to do that. I absolutely think they can get a top tackle because of the playmakers that are available, because of the quarterbacks that will be prioritized by teams. And I don't think they're a quarterback team in this first round unless somehow Caleb Williams or Drake May became available to them, whether through a home run trade or they drop because of some weird Dan Marino thing or Laramie Tunsil thing that happens and they drop there. So the Jets aren't in the market for a quarterback. They get the top O tackle on their board with Fashanu from Penn State. Mine is Joe Alt, but they're only one spot aside from each other. You'll be able to see my rankings also fairly soon when I drop my top 50, but it's still working out those final 12 or 13 spots. I know the players, just the order. So finishing up on that, but you'll see that for me, Fashanu is tackle 2, Latham's tackle 3, and Alt is tackle 1. So we'll see Joe Alt here on this next slide when we get to the 11 through 15. So now that we're out of the top 10, I'm just going to go through quickly the picks and some scenarios. I think the Vikings get a veteran quarterback, whether it's Kirk Cousins, whether it's a guy such as Russell Wilson or Justin Fields in a trade. It wouldn't happen in Minnesota, but there's a lot of veteran quarterbacks available that I think the Vikings will get their hands on. I don't like them at 11 for a quarterback, but they go with the top defensive back. And then Dallas Turner, the Broncos just need to bulk up their pass rush. I don't like them for a quarterback either. I also think they could benefit from a bridge guy for a year or two. And Sean Payton has great job security. He's not going anywhere for a little bit, so he's got time to find that quarterback. They could always take a flyer on a guy like Zach Wilson or Trey Lance, or once again, Justin Fields in Denver. Sean Payton can help him out tremendously. There's always guys on the move now at quarterback. Here's the pick I want to focus on in this portion is Xavier Legette from South Carolina. This is one of my big risers. He is going to be an absolute weapon. He's lightning speed. You watch his highlights. You watch his tape. Ball's in his hands. He is gone. 0 to 100 real quick. He's twitchy. He's a good route runner. Needs some work. Needs some polish. He can work on his ball skills a bit. But overall, I think Legette is the guy that goes to the combine, runs a 4.3, runs every route in the book, kills it, great cone drill, great everything. And teams will start to say, hey, this is a guy we could do something with if we get our hands on. And for Chicago in this spot, you already traded back in the draft, so you can take a guy like this. You could reach on a guy like this in a really loaded receiver class. And then we go to 14 where Joe Alt goes. And this is just, I'll talk about teams drafting for traits. A lot of teams find a specialized trait that they like. With Latham, it's right tackle is the trait that's specialized that they enjoy. They've seen him play it. I think that they could reach up and jump over the tackles to make sure that they got Latham in the Raiders in that scenario. And then the Jets might fall in love with the power of Fashanu or the versatility of Fashanu. But sometimes the guy without the trait is just the most polished guy. And a few years ago, we saw it at receiver when Henry Ruggs went first because his trait was speed. Jerry Jeudy went second because his trait was twitch and agility. But who was third? CeeDee Lamb, who was undoubtedly the best prospect at receiver in that draft. He had the build, he had the route running, he had the ball skills, he had the production, and he went third to Dallas. They got him in a real miracle all to them. I mean, that's a big draft day drop for CeeDee Lamb. I remember watching him go down the board. And then Justin Jefferson was also in that class, but he was not in the group with those three. And the Cowboys benefited. Sometimes teams just fall in love with the trait and they go for it. So now I'm sure you've been watching and you've gotten to this point and you say, hey, where are the rest of the quarterbacks? Because 4 went in the top 5. That has never happened in draft history. And Michael Penix, who has been one of the biggest names in the sport all year, second in Heisman voting, national champion quarterback, national champion appearance at quarterback for Washington. Where is he? Well, how about Seattle, who, while I'm recording this, I just find out Pete Carroll's out. But I love the fit in Seattle because they have a great offensive coordinator who I'm sure will stay in place if he doesn't get a head coaching job. and they have all these weapons. Penix could sit for a year. I know with a guy at his age, you don't want him sitting for a year, but it doesn't really matter in the big picture. You're going to have him for a decade plus if you develop him regardless. So you get Penix at 16. He's got all these weapons: Metcalf, Lockett, Smith-Njigba, Walker, and a pretty good, not great offensive line in Seattle. And he gets a great fan base and a good market to play in with the Hawks. In a favorable division, yet, you have the best team in the league, but favorable division in comparison to a lot of others. So I like Penix in a developmental spot such as Seattle. I did think about him before this in Minnesota, in Denver, but I think the injuries are really going to become an issue in this process because multiple ACL tears is not something that goes well in medicals. So I think a 6-year college player with multiple ACL tears, multiple season-ending injuries besides the ACL tears is just not going to go over well. Let's move on. Cooper DeJean to Jacksonville, and they just need to bolster up their secondary. Jacksonville's got a lot of holes that they can patch up, but I would start in the secondary and at the safety position. Just they need to be better on defense next year. They need to be more dominant. They need to have more takeaways, and DeJean's a guy that'll help them with that. And then this is the interesting one at 18, Keon Coleman, because I think T. Higgins is out. I think he'll be on the move, and there could be a trade here. You'll see later on. Cincinnati will also pick a 30 because I'm going to pair T. Higgins up with CeeDee Lamb. How will Dallas do it with the contracts? Don't ask me, but they'll find a way. Jerry Jones oftentimes does, and he's desperate for a ring. Adding another weapon opposite CeeDee is very important because Brandon Cooks did not work out the way they wanted him to, nor did Michael Gallup, and obviously Amari Cooper is no longer there. That didn't work out either. Packers need some insurance for Jair Alexander, so I go Nate Wiggins there. Nothing really flies off the tape for me with Wiggins, but that's also a good thing because nothing negative flies off either. I think he'd be developed really nicely in Green Bay. And then one of the best prospects that nobody's talking about is Talius Fuagua. I'm sorry for butchering his name, but really good right tackle from Oregon State. He is just going to play right tackle for someone at a high level for a really long time, and he could go as early as the top 10. I mean, I could see him going as early as the Jets because they're in the market for an offensive lineman. They're expected to take a lineman, and if the two guys go in the top 9, Alt and Fashanu, I would say that Fuaga might be the next for a team like the Jets. And the Bucs with this pick, with Wirfs, the way he played at left tackle this year, and with Fuaga at right tackle, I mean, that would just be a dominant pair of bookends. Now we get to the Cardinals pick at 21. Jonathan Gannon needs pass rushers. Chop Robinson comes in. The Cardinals pass rush was pretty good this year, and you can't name anybody on it. Chop Robinson comes in. He'll be developed properly. I guarantee it. Jonathan Gannon's a very good defensive coach. That's been established with the way the Eagles have played without him and the way the Cardinals have played with him. So I trust Gannon and the Cardinals there, develop a guy like Robinson. And it's also a best player available situation for me right there. At 22, Amarius Mims. The Rams just get a project tackle from Georgia. He definitely needs some work. I wouldn't recommend for a team that picks in the top 10 every year to take him. He kind of reminds me of Mekhi Becton. This is how I felt about Mekhi Becton at this point. And then the combine happened, and Becton shot up, and the Jets took him, and it's a disaster. But Mims to the Rams could work out. Brian Thomas, wide receiver, he was stuck in the shadow of Neighbors this year. Everyone talks about Jaden Daniels and Malik Neighbors. Well, go roll the tape on Brian Thomas because this guy's a stud also. And if Neighbors wasn't there, if he wasn't stuck behind him, he might be the top 10, top 12 pick. Steelers need to totally redo their offense, though. Johnson, Pickens, and Najee Harris have been incredible disappointments, not to mention their quarterbacks, Rudolph and Pickett, have been incredible disappointments. But those skill players have evidently not bought into winning for them this year. So that's the first place I go. Their offensive line wasn't bad, so they can afford to go skill position. And then 24, Kool-Aid McKinstry. I don't know why it says linebacker. He is a defensive back. He is pictured there from Alabama. But Kool-Aid McKinstry is best player available right here. I understand that they have Ramsey and Howard. But how much longer do you have those guys? You want to keep Vic Fangio's secondary strong and prosperous? If it's not, you're in trouble, especially in the division that you're in. So, and the conference as a whole. So, Kool-Aid McKinstry goes here. He's the 13th ranked player for me right now. And if he's here at 24, you have to just take him because best player available is usually the greatest path to winning. And then at 25, Jeremiah Trotter. So Trotter gives the Eagles a second-level player. They don't have a second-level player on their defense. That's good. Shaq Leonard is probably the best second-level player they have, and that's a problem because he got cut this year. He got cut midseason this year because he's just not good anymore. So you need to get him. Also, nice family tie there. It reminds me of Joey Porter Jr. last year, who I loved to Pittsburgh. I mocked him almost every time to Pittsburgh. So Trotter to Philadelphia. His father, as you can see, is an Eagles Hall of Fame member, and it would just be a nice little story there at a position of need, kind of a full circle moment the year they need a linebacker or any player at that second tier. They have a team legend's son fall into their lap, Jeremiah Trotter at Clemson. He's a fun highlight reel, so you should go roll that as well. Then we get to pick 26, the Kansas City Chiefs, Emeka Ibuka. Obviously, these selections as well will be different after the first weekend of the playoffs. We'll do another mock draft once the Super Bowl wraps up, and we'll be coming out with offseason stuff all offseason long from Super Bowl to draft. But we have Ibuka here. Ohio State was stuck behind Harrison, was in the Smith and Jigba shadow. He's been in a tough wide receiver room to get reps. Right now, a lot of people don't have him in their top 40 or 50. I have him in the top 35. I think the Chiefs just need to add a whole new receiving group. That's evident when you watch. Maybe a new running back as well to share the load with Pacheco and try to add some more production at that position. But Patrick Mahomes needs his weapons, and this is a place to go. If he's here at 26, I absolutely go there. At 27, the Texans go Latu, the edge rusher, and this is just get D'Amico Ryans some help on defense. Start to build it up. He can turn this into an elite defense just as Robert Saleh has with the Jets, taking that San Francisco mindset that they have on defense, that philosophy. It works with developing defensive players. So he comes into Houston. He's going to do the same thing. One guy is Blake Cashman right away this year, was one of the top linebackers in the league. You had never heard of him before this year. He's in his 5th or 6th season. He was a good player out of Minnesota, 5th-round pick, ironically also for the Jets. But he was a nobody, and D'Amico came in, and immediately that's his first developmental story. And then the first year to second year jump for Derek Stingley was outstanding. So let's keep building that defense for CJ Stroud, who will develop with the offense on their own. You have a second year wide receiver in Tank Dell, third year wide receiver Nico Collins, and CJ Stroud going into a second year. Those players should all get a year better. You have a good veteran tight end in Schultz. I'd say let's go defense here in this first round. Best defensive player available, and that's who it is. And then you have Quinyon Mitchell, the corner, who no one's really talking about yet either. He is from Toledo, just a real solid, good corner, and they need a franchise defensive back. It's not going to work out long-term with C.J. Gardner-Johnson, and they've been looking for this guy since they drafted Okudah with the 3rd pick. They haven't had anyone since Slay departed to Philly back there in the secondary that's really stood out to you, and they're getting good in the front 7. The Lions are very deep and talented up front, so let's work on that back end. They have a good offense. They score points, one of the best offenses in the league. Work on that defense. Here's the pick of this 5-pick slot here is Bo Nix, quarterback going to the Saints. They trade up. They send Buffalo pick 45 and a 2025 first-rounder to trade up. From 45 was their next pick. They move they move back into the first round for Bo Nix, who's just dropping. This gives you an insurance policy for Derek Carr. It's really bad with Derek Carr. That is not a good long-term solution by any means, and everybody knows that. That's not me teaching you something or trying to educate. Bo Nix is a good quarterback. He's not great, but he's good, and you can see something in him when he plays. You can see the way he processes the field, runs the offense. Whatever he did at Oregon worked, and you need to take what he did there, implement it at the NFL level because a lot of teams are running this style offense now. It's the way of the NFL. So get Bo Nix in, get your insurance at quarterback. trade up here is absolutely in order. I don't think Bo Nix makes it to day 2 of the draft. And he would be now the 6th quarterback taken in the first round and the final quarterback. And then the last 3 picks of the draft, I'm just going to round out really fast. It's a Bengals trade-in for Jordan Morgan to bolster the offensive tackle, and then Troy Fatanu, an interior lineman from Washington, and Graham Barton, interior lineman from Duke. Those guys will just provide depth and some cheap stability for a few years for these two teams. And as for the Bengals, they'll have their 4 years of a tackle, and they need to just keep trying to bolster this offensive line. You can move Morgan into guard also if you need it, but Orlando Brown alone is not taking their line over the top. We saw it this year. Next mock draft, probably going to be after the Super Bowl, definitely going to be after the Super Bowl, and we'll have a lot of NFL content coming this offseason. Appreciate you sticking around and watching. See you in the next one.